morning. Good morning, Japan. Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Maitreyi Das, and I am the Manager Global Programs in the Global Practice for Urban Resilience, Disaster Risk, and Land at the World Bank. And it is a great pleasure to welcome you all to this very special seminar that we have organized along with the government of Japan. So welcome to everybody. Our special seminar today is on Building Back Better. It's on the reflections of the 10-year anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake. 10 years and 1 week ago, on March 11, 2011, an earthquake of the magnitude of 9 on the Richter scale hit the northeastern coast of Japan, triggering a deadly tsunami that caused extensive damage, havoc to the lives and livelihoods of the people of Tohoku. We would like to take this opportunity to honor the memory of the victims of the disaster, as well as the courage of the citizens of the Tohoku region, where the community came together to rebuild and recover from the devastation that was wreaked by the earthquake. And so today, it's with great honor that I welcome you to this special seminar to commemorate this day, this 10-year anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake. Today, we will hear from Japanese leaders who have worked firsthand in the reconstruction process in Tohoku over the past 10 years, as well as those who are working frontline on the ground over all these years. They are at the forefront, and what we take away from today will be what other countries have to learn from the experience of Japan. To open our session, I would first like to welcome Mr. Miyahara. He's our Executive Director at the World Bank for Japan, and to kindly make his opening remarks. Over to you, Mr. Miyahara.
Thank you very much, Maitreyi. Good morning, Tokyo, and good morning, Washington. Sorry, good evening, Washington. Distinguished speakers and panelists, fellow participants, it is my great pleasure to co-host today's special seminar to commemorate with you the 10th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake. I would like to express a sincere appreciation to Mari and the bank staff concerned for helping organize this important event. On March 11th, 2011, the large tsunami associated with the magnitude 9.0 earthquake caused a devastating damage for Tohoku and the neighboring regions of Japan, with more than 19,000 people dead and 2,000 missing. Approximately 122,000 houses were utterly destroyed and 470,000 people displaced. The number of evacuees has been reduced to about 40,000, and the number of temporary housing units to 1,000 as of March last year. Infrastructure such as roads, ports, and railroads has been restored. Industries have been revitalized, and people's hearts and minds have been gradually restored. Thanks to the support of people around the world, a strong recovery is underway. So, on behalf of the Japanese people, let me first express my deepest gratitude for the heartfelt messages of condolences and encouragement that we received from all over the world after the catastrophic event. We received generous support from more than 160 countries and 40 international organizations. Among them were the World Bank Group's fundraising activities and messages. In addition, 1 month after the disaster, Japan held the first disaster risk management event with kind participation by the World Bank, represented by Sili Muryani, Managing Director of the World Bank at the time, and currently the Finance Minister of Indonesia, and Kristalina Georgieva, Commissioner of the European Commission then and the Managing Director of the IMF now, to discuss the importance of disaster prevention and preparedness. The event was a precursor to the Sendai Dialogue that occurred during the 2012 Fund Bank annual meeting in Japan and set things in motion for establishing the partnership of Japan and the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, GFDRR, of the bank. This movement later led to the formation of an international framework with the adoption of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction by UN member states in 2015, which aims to substantially reduce disaster risk and save lives and livelihoods. This new framework has provided a basis for advocacy for enhancing disaster preparedness and effective response, and building back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. I would like to say proudly that the mainstreaming of disaster risk management and our collective endeavor for development assistance started with the joint efforts of the World Bank and Japan as such. The Japanese government launched the Sendai Cooperation Initiative for Disaster Risk Reduction as associated with the Sendai Framework, and has extended cooperation and assistance in related investments and human resource development. Such supports amounted to $4 billion and 40,000 people trained in 2015 through 2018. Our JICA has been working on disaster risk reduction in more than 140 countries. The World Bank Japan flagship report, Lifelines, was published in 2019, which suggests that investing $1 in disaster resilient infrastructure yields $4 worth of benefits to our people and societies. In addition, investments in disaster risk identification, reduction, and preparedness, together with innovative tools of disaster risk finance such as insurance, are essential for building resilience to shocks. For instance, providing universal access to early warning systems has the potential to reduce asset losses by $13 billion each year. So Japan, with GFDRR, has been supporting countries in developing hazard maps and building early warning systems. This year on, we will jointly build back better from the COVID-19 to re-establish resilient economies and societies, which should be better protected from and prepared for future natural disasters and other global risks, including of pandemic, climate change, food insecurity, and so forth. Together with the World Bank Group, Japan will further strengthen our cooperation for multilateral endeavor for enhancing disaster resilience. I wish that today's seminar contribute to elevating our shared ambition for stronger resilience to a higher level. Thank you very much, and back to you, Maitreyi.
Thank you so much, Mr. Miyahara, for those very thoughtful comments and opening remarks. With that, I would like to introduce to you our Managing Director for Development Policy and Partnerships, Ms. Mari Pangetsu, and I will invite her now to share with us some of her opening remarks for this seminar. Over to you, Mari. You're muted.
Here we go. Good morning. Ohayo gozaimasu. As we commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, we are honored to co-host this seminar with the government of Japan, along with these distinguished speakers and panelists. First, on behalf of the World Bank Group, I would like to solemnly remember the victims and families affected by the disaster and honor the continued efforts by the people of Japan to rebuild their communities and restore livelihoods. Your work is an inspiration to us all. I can still recall, as I was still in government at the time, coming with our president of Indonesia, on a visit to the Miyagi prefecture in June 2011 to visit the site. And we see that despite the devastating impact, Japan's quick and effective recovery and reconstruction efforts have shown countries around the world that it is indeed possible to build back better. But disasters never cease, and a recent earthquake striking the same region was a stark reminder of the importance of disaster risk management and preparedness. Indonesia, my home country, also shares a history of natural hazards. 3 months into being in government in 2004, an earthquake off the coast of Sumatra Island triggered a massive tsunami across the Indian Ocean and hit Aceh, Indonesia's most northern province. And it was very hard hit with a large loss of lives. But we were also able to rebuild back better. And not only that, we also achieved peace in Aceh at the same time. And as recently as January this year, Sulawesi, which experienced a strong earthquake and tsunami in 2018, was again hit by a powerful earthquake. World Bank research estimates the impact of extreme natural hazards is equivalent to a total of 520 billion loss in annual consumption and forces some 26 million people into poverty each year. These negative impacts will increase due to population growth, rapid urbanization, and adverse effects of climate change. And we know that when a disaster strikes, it is always the poor who suffer the most. For more than a decade, the World Bank has forged a strong partnership with Japan, a global leader in mainstreaming disaster risk management, or DRM, to advance disaster resilience in developing countries through advocacy, knowledge, and investment. Many of these activities are funded through the Japan World Bank Program for Mainstreaming DRM in Developing Countries, which was established with the support from Japan's Ministry of Finance. In Kenya, the program funded climate vulnerability assessments to design a more resilient Isiolo-Mandera corridor, a major road network in the northeastern region. The assessment informed a transformative project backed by the World Bank financing to improve access for over 3.2 million people living there. Through the World Bank Tokyo DRM Hub, the program has enabled application of Japanese expertise to support more than 90 client countries, helping inform the design of over 32 billion in World Bank financing and contributing to the Sendai Framework for Disaster Reduction Goals, which was mentioned just then by Takeshi-san. The day that the Great East Japan earthquake hit 10 years ago, March 11th, is coincidentally also the day WHO declared the COVID-19 global pandemic. This past year has clearly illustrated the systemic nature of risks spreading from health to economic systems and to global well-being. The pandemic has also underlined the consequences of underinvesting in resilience and the need to work across sectors to build disaster and pandemic-ready systems and stronger, more inclusive strategies and institutions. Our DRM teams are working closely with the health teams, especially those in the newly created Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Trust Fund, which Japan is a founding donor. We cannot do this alone. The financing demands alone are truly large, and only through cooperation can we turn this crisis into an opportunity and build back better. To conclude, I believe we can work together, and we will, to build more equitable and sustainable economies and societies and help everyone become more resilient to future shocks. Thank you. Domo arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you so much, Mari, for your remarks. And with that, it is my great pleasure to share with you a video message by Miss Kori. She's the mayor of Sendai City. And her remarks on video will be followed by some film footage where we can see how they have rebuilt and regenerated their city over the last 10 years. So if we could move now to the video message by the mayor of the city of Sendai, please.
皆さんこんにちは。私は日本の仙台市長郡和子です。日本政府と世界銀行様が共催されるセミナーの開催にあたり、一言ご挨拶を申し上げます。東日本大震災から10年が経ちました。 1000年に一度とも言われる津波やライフラインの途絶など、未曾有の大震災からの復興に向けたこれまでの10年は、この町を大切に思う多くの皆様と共に歩んできた歳月でした。国内外からいただいた数々のご支援に対しまして、この場をお借りいたしまして、改めて御礼を申し上げます。本市はこの間、防災集団移転や復興公営住宅整備による住宅の再建はもとより、津波防災の強化のため、避難の丘や高さ6メートルの堤防機能を持たせた東部復興道路の整備など、各班にわたる復旧復興施策に努めてきたところです。世界銀行様には、震災翌年の第67回 IMF 世界銀行年次総会特別イベントの仙台開催をはじめ、各国でのフォーラムやワークショップなど、復興の過程で得られた経験や教訓の発信に格別のご協力をいただいてまいりました。また、近年では仙台市で開催された国連防災世界会議において採択された仙台防災枠組みについて、そこに記されている防災の主流化を推進するため、各国での強靭なインフラやリスクへの備えなどに重点的に取り組んでおられます機構は、世界の防災・減災において欠かせない重要な存在であり、その役割が大きく期待されていると認識しております。強靭な都市を構築していくためには、先ほど申し上げました津波防災などのハード整備はもとより、地域防災におけるリーダーの育成や防災教育など、コミュニティレベルでの災害対応力の強化が大切です。本市は多様な主体による防災・減災の取り組みなどを世界へ、未来へ伝え、国内外の防災文化へ貢献してまいります。結びに、本シンポジウムの開催により、参加される皆様の取り組みがますます成果を上げられ、それらが世界に還元されて、より良い未来につながることを祈念いたしまして、私からの挨拶といたします。
On the 11th March 2011, the Great East Japan earthquake shook the city. Infrastructure was disrupted. The tsunami devastated the coastal areas. Almost 20,000 people nationwide were killed or went missing. Sendai, the central city of the Tohoku area. Sendai stood up to recover from the disaster of an unprecedented scale. To recover the damaged areas, Sendai aimed not only to return to the state it was in before the earthquake, but also to build the city more resistant to disasters. Multiple defenses reduced the damage inflicted by the tsunamis to residential areas while being considerate of the environment. And to promote disaster risk reduction measures, Sendai decided to unite the following three powers: self-help of citizens, mutual aid in communities, and public assistance from governments. In March 2015, the third United Nations World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction was held in Sendai City. The Sendai Framework was adopted to provide countries with a global policy guidance for disaster risk reduction for the next 15 years until 2030. It should not be only national governments or local governments that are responsible for disaster risk reduction. The framework mentions that it is important that multi-stakeholders work together for disaster risk reduction. Many citizens participate in Sendai's disaster risk reduction activities, which is the unique character of people in Sendai City.
自分の命は自分で守ることだと。
いつ何時どういう災害が起きるか分かりません。
若い人たちに語り継いで
進んで自分からいろんなことをできるように。
私たちは役に立てるんだな。
When I arrive at my country, I have a plan to share all this information.
Sendai City, a disaster resilient and environmentally friendly city, is contributing to global efforts on disaster risk reduction. It depends on each of its residents to support the city's endeavor and to create a new future together.
Thank you very much, to the mayor and to the city of Sendai. With this, I would like to introduce Mr. Okamoto. He is the former Vice Minister of the Reconstruction Agency, who will share with us his keynote presentation. Since 2011, Mr. Okamoto has led the national government's response and reconstruction efforts and has served for more than 9.5 years at the forefront of the reconstruction from the Great East Japan earthquake. He's a very well-published and well-known person of course, in the work that he has done. And his presentation is pre-recorded. So over to our tech crew to play his pre-recorded message. It is on a decade of resilience, Japan's efforts on the Great East Japan earthquake.
皆さんこんにちは。岡本です。2011年東日本大震災から10年が経ちます。1000年に一度と言われた大津波が東日本沿岸を襲い、多くの町並みを流し去りました。あれから10年、日本は見事に立ち直りました。しかも以前より強い町に作り変えることができたのです。今日はそれをお話しします。ではスライドをご覧ください。今日の話の要点です。1点目は10年で大規模な復興工事が完了したことを報告します。2点目は元に戻すだけでなく、より良いまちづくりをしたことです。その一つは津波に強いまちづくりをしたこと。もう一つは施設設備の復旧だけでなく、町のにぎわいを取り戻すための政策転換に踏み切ったことです。では強い町をどのように作ったか、写真を見ていただきます。次のスライドをお願いします。これは岩手県宮古市の太郎地区です。ここでは高台移転した例を見ていただきます。津波に襲われる町の航空写真です。右下に見えるのが漁港、そして三角形に広がった町。これが津波に飲み込まれて跡形もなくなりました。次の写真をご覧ください。これは津波が襲った後、瓦礫を片付けた後の同じ写真です。町には建物は何も残っておりません。再度ここに町を作ることは、津波が来る時の危険を考えて住宅を作ることを制限いたしました。今右上に赤く丸を囲っている山、住民たちはここに住宅を移すことを選択いたしました。次の写真をご覧ください。これが、先ほどの被災した地域をやや斜めから撮った写真です。右の方に住宅団地が見えると思います。立派な住宅団地が完成しております。元あった町は住宅を規制しておりますので、工場などの建物だけが建っております。これは近くの高台に移転した例です。では次の例をご覧いただきます。これは宮城県岩沼市の沿岸部です。右側に太平洋があり、波打ち際に赤く囲った丸いところが6つの集落がございました。次の写真をご覧ください。これが津波に飲まれた後の町です。航空写真からですね、町があったことは分かりません。住民たちはこの3つの地区から離れて左に小さく四角く囲っておりますが、この内陸部に集団で移転することを決断いたしました。次の写真をご覧ください。これが住宅を建築する前の予定地でした。次の写真をご覧ください。これが住宅が建築された後の現在の写真です。6つの集落がそれぞれにまとまって移転し、安全な町ができています。次の写真をご覧ください。これは宮城県女川町の写真です。下の方に港が見えておりますが、この町を津波が流し去りました。次の写真をご覧ください。これが津波に襲われた直後の写真です。大きな建物を残してほぼ全ての町が飲み込まれてしまいました。真ん中のところにやや高くなった建物があります。これを覚えておいてください。その後ろの山も見ておいてください。 では工事が進んだ後の写真をご覧いただきます。先ほど高台に建っていた建物はこの写真の左側にあるところです。10メートルもの土を持ってかさ上げをしましたので、高かった高台が高くなくなっています。そしてその後ろに広がっていた山がですね、切り広げられて、住宅などになっています。このようにして安全な町を作りました。次のページをお願いします。全体では、土地をかさ上げしたのが50地区、高台に移転したのが324地区、これだけの大工事を10年間で行いました。次のページをお願いします。発災の10年を簡単な表にいたしました。左半分のところで5年目、右側で残り5年目です。住まいと町は現時点で見ていただきますと、住宅用の宅地を作ったのが1万8000戸、災害公営住宅が3万戸ございます。このほかに国からの支援を受けて自力で住宅を復旧した方々が15万戸ございます。道路、鉄道はすべて復旧いたしました。下に産業、なりわいの再生を書きましたが、農業については5年目で約7割、現在ではほぼすべて復旧、水産加工業が5年目で9割、そして、現在もほぼ復旧になっております。外国人の宿泊者数も順調に伸びております。以上が復興の現状です。次のスライドをご覧いただきます。住宅と道路あるいは公共施設を復旧すれば災害復旧と我々も考えておりましたけれども、町で暮らしていく際にはさらに重要な要素があることに私たちは気づきました。この表の真ん中にあります産業となりわいの再生です。商店がなければ暮らしていけませんし、働く場所がなければ地元の活力は戻ってまいりません。日本国政府は初めて個人の産業事業主に対して無料の施設提供と国庫補助金を投入いたしました。もう一つ重要なのが一番下のコミュニティの再建です。町が破壊され避難所に入り仮設住宅に入る、その段階各段階でご近所の付き合いあるいは友達とのつながりが切れてしまいます。この点につきましても非営利団体 NPO などの協力を得て支援をいたしました。具体例を見ていただきます。次のページをお願いします。これがコミュニティ再建の事例です。上は仮設住宅、左側におられる避難者に対して右側から支援員が見守りに行っております。下の図は新しくできた住宅団地でコミュニティ、日本語では町内会と申しますが、それをどのように再生するかという相談をしております。次のページをお願いします。産業となりわいの支援の実例です。左側の写真はプレハブで作りました商店街です。商店がなければ住宅が復旧しても買い物ができません。でまず商店を提供いたしました。右は工場です。これもプレハブの工場の中に機械設備が入っておりますが、これについても国庫から支援をいたしました。買い物の場、そして働く場というのでにぎわいを創出したのです。次のページをお願いします。工場の施設設備を復旧しただけでは売れないという事態に対して被災した企業に大企業から人とノウハウの支援をしました。この図は左側におられる女性が魚の紐の加工品を作っておられます。なかなか売れないので右側に東京の大企業から来た職員たちがですね、社員たちがネーミングがいいのか、あるいは包装紙を変えるのか、新しい証券を開拓するのか、そういう助言もいたしました。次のページをお願いします。先ほど申し上げましたように、1番目のインフラと住宅を復旧すれば災害復旧だと私どもも思っておりましたけれども、町のにぎわいを再建するためには2つ目の産業のなりわいの再生が重要であること、そして3つ目のコミュニティの再建が必要であるということに気づき、政府の支援を1番から2番3番まで広げることにいたしました。これによって強い町とともにより活力のある町が作れたと思います。 次のページお願いします。今日お話し申し上げましたのは、10年であの大災害から日本は立ち上がったこと、大規模な復興工事を完了したこと、そしてその際には元に戻すだけではなく、より強い町、より良い町を作ることを目指したことです。見ていただきましたように、高台移転やあるいはかさ上げをしました。そして、インフラだけでなく産業振興、そして、コミュニティづくりにも力を注ぎました。この間、世界の国々から温かい支援をいただきました。改めて感謝申し上げます。大きな災害は起きてもらっては困りますが、今後この日本の経験が他国の参考になれば幸いです。今日はありがとうございました。
With deep thanks to Mr. Okamoto, I would take this opportunity to move very quickly to our next session and invite Ms. Doden, who will moderate that session. So over to you, Ms. Doden.
Thank you, Maitri. Good morning, everyone from Tokyo, and good day and good evening for those of you in different time zones. Thank you for joining the session. My name is Aiko Doden, and I am a Special Affairs Commentator and Senior Director at NHK World TV. It is an honor for me to moderate this panel discussion today, a conversation on lessons from Great East Japan earthquake on resilience. We aim to reflect on the 10-year journey since March 11th to connect the relevant lessons to forward-looking efforts to enhance resilience for the future, not only in Japan, but around the world. Just a few days ago, I spoke to a factory owner in disaster-afflicted area whom I visited only weeks after the earthquake and tsunami, and she says hello to you all too. She says people's lives have changed forever, but says it gives her solace to think that the world is trying to draw some tangible lessons on this occasion. For this conversation today, we have invited 4 distinguished panelists, all of them leaders in their own fields, working on resilience from various countries, sectors, and professions. They will be sharing with us their experiences and perspectives on the key lessons from March 11th. We will learn from them how in the past 10 years, their ideas and initiatives have evolved to better address the reality we face today. As you know, the world we have today is faced with dire challenges such as inequality and inequity, political and social instability, and uncertain hazards, including climate change, as we continue to live through the pandemic. Now, let me introduce to you our panelists. Mr. Amano Yusuke, the Senior Vice President of Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA. Prior to assuming his current position, he has worked for Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism as the Director for Watershed Management, Sewage Management Department, Water and Disaster Management Bureau, leading various initiatives in the fields of water resource management and disaster management. Dr. Imamura Fumihiko, Professor of Tsunami Engineering and Director of the International Research Institute of Disaster Science, Tohoku University. He's a global expert on tsunami engineering, coastal and river engineering and disaster science, and he also serves as Vice President of Tohoku University in charge of promoting earthquake disaster recovery. Dr. Ishii Naoko, Professor, Executive Vice President and Inaugurating Director for Center for Global Commons, the University of Tokyo. And until quite recently, she served the GEF Global Environment Facility as CEO and Chairperson from 2012 to 2020. Dr. Sameh Waba is an Egyptian national as the Global Director for the World Bank's Urban Disaster Risk Management, Resilience and Land Global Practice. He oversees the formulation of the World Bank's strategy and the design and delivery of all lending, technical assistance, policy advisory activities, and partnerships at the global level. In the next 40 to 45 minutes, we will be discussing topics followed by a question and answer session. We welcome questions from the participants in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the WebEx screen throughout the session. These questions will be responded by the World Bank team on their website following this event. So let's hear from our panelists. To kickstart, I've asked the panelists to share with us their take on the works on resilience and the impact of the March 11th on their work over the past 10 years. In other words, whether there have been any key lessons or takeaways from the March 11th that have been particularly important, and how our speakers have worked to apply and integrate those lessons within their work over the past decade. Now, this is a big topic, but we are going to be very strict with time, and panelists each have 3 minutes for their presentation. I'd first like to invite Mr. Amano to share with us his views.
Thank you very much. Among many lessons learned from the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, there were 2 key findings. Although the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami caused devastating damage and loss, our first finding is what we prepared before the disaster was proven to be effective and protected people's lives and assets. For instance, seismic retrofitting of buildings reduced the collapse. The emergency alert system helped stop the bullet train immediately to achieve 0 casualty, even though the earthquake occurred in the middle of the day with many trains operating. Resilient road embankment functioned as secondary risk reduction measures. The Sendai-Tobu Expressway stands at 7 to 10 meters above the ground. This highway serves as a seawall and protected city and evacuees from tsunami and debris. Tsunami evacuation drill was effective to save people's lives. As you see, it was reaffirmed that investment in DRR is critical to reduce damage and loss caused by disasters. Next, please. The second lesson learned is that as we were not prepared for everything, we need to keep improving capacity to cope with mega disaster, which exceeds what we have prepared. We lost many lives and assets from the tsunami, and in future there will always be unexpected scale of disaster again. However, these experiences also present us with the necessity to go above and beyond the existing system. The graph you see in the slide shows the speedy recovery of major transportation infrastructure after the disaster. The standby procurement agreement between the governments and construction companies enable a rapid rehabilitation of the key infrastructure. It was one of the improvements made based on the learning of past disasters. This agility to exceed what we have prepared is the essence of resilience. Next, please. These 2 key findings are integral part of JICA's development cooperation. In the Philippines, our long-term DRR investment in flood risk reduction has shown some results. The Mangahan floodway and Pasig-Marikina River Channel improvement projects are part of JICA's multi-phase flood management support program in the country. Next, please. With the floodway constructed and river channel strengthened, the last year's typhoon Ulysses had a minimum impact, significantly reducing inundation and economic damage by 85%. Next, please. In Nepal, Gorkha earthquake in 2015 underlined the lack of investment in risk reduction before the disaster. JICA supports the country's resilient recovery from this unprecedented disaster with enhanced coping capacity from future disasters. Next, please. In JICA's support, recovery and long-term investment in DRR are implemented in parallel. While undertaking recovery project, we support the government in revisiting the future risk scenario in Kathmandu Valley and investing in structure and non-structured DRM measures to prepare for future mega disasters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amano. Next, I'd like to ask Professor Imamura to kindly share his views.
Good morning and good evening. I'm Fumihiko Imamura, the director of the International Research Institute of the Sciences, with the 7 research division and 37 field. It is just started 1 year after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake tsunami. So you can see the members, it is very interdisciplinary. From natural sciences and engineering and human and social sciences, even including the disaster medical sciences. We have the 60 faculty members and 50 staff and students work together. Next, please. So we have the good early warning system. After the detecting the earthquake, including the magnitude, we have the tsunami warning. By using the database, especially including the information of the earthquake, you can see some progress within 3 minutes. We have the good information of the tsunami height and arrival immediately. Next, please. But go back to the 2011. This is the series of the warning message of the tsunami height with the magnitude information. The first information issued only 3 minutes after the earthquake. It's very quick, but underestimated the magnitude, 7.9, actually 9. We have very small tsunami height evaluated and estimated by using the database. Miyagi only 6 meters, and Fukushima and Iwate only 3 minutes. It is much less than the height of the seawall. So many people worried about tsunami, but the first announcement was very underestimated. But after 10 minutes or 20 minutes, we have the real-time information we obtained. It is offshore tsunami detection system. So tsunami height is revised from 6 to 10 meters and 3 to 6 meters. And time by time, we have the accurate information according to the real-time observation and revise the earthquake information. So in the beginning, we have the very quick information, but the low accuracy. So after time, we have the more accurate, but too late. This is a trade-off and one of our lessons. Next. So after our experiences, we installed real-time observation system for earthquake and tsunami offshore, more than 150 sensors connected by the fiber cable. It is one of most dense observation system operating in real time. So whenever earthquake and tsunami happened, we can detect very detailed, and we can provide accurate information. Next, please. But this is very special. So we now trying to apply the new way with AI. So sometimes we have a limited of the observation system and the station, but we have the AI, and before we have the learning system, we simulate many cases with the scenario. So whenever earthquake happened, we can get limited information, but using the AI, we can predict the time series of the tsunami as well as inundation area. It is very essential for the people to evacuate. Please, next one. So let's change a little bit topics. It is the build back better. It is already introduced in the beginning of this symposium. So Sendai is one of the legend city, I think, including the multi-layer protection system. On the coast, we have the seawall, but try to as smaller as possible. Behind them, we utilize the green belt. It's a little bit elevated, and also using the infrastructure, it is elevated road as well. It is well protected, not only tsunami, but also flood. And we have the evacuation shelters. Next, please. Next, yeah. This is the situation of the build back better at the Sendai coastal area. So it is already demonstrated in the video. So we are very, very pleased to inform or present you the situation. So the design of the city are well, and we have the residential area and non-residential area for the resident city. Next, please. So we have now a new project about the ISO for disaster risk reduction at the technical committee 268. It is the smart city and community infrastructure. So the idea of the Sendai framework for DR should be implemented to the world community with the cooperation with the private company. So that's why we are trying to forming the new working group to discuss this small city infrastructure that strengthens disaster resilience. So which might be a talk later. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Professor Imamura. Then the next speaker to speak is Professor Ishii.
Good morning and good evening to the all participants. Being a Japanese, it is really my honor to be here to attend this special seminar. But the reason I think I'm invited to this seminar is actually that in my previous capacity, the CEO of the GEF, and how the GEF operation has changed that then after the March 11 event, and what kind of lessons that then are integrated into the GEF operation. So let me actually that then address that question. Let us take a step back a little bit about what happened for the last decade. This actually the picture is coming from the World Economic Forum, the Global Risk Report, and maybe too small for you to really read it. So let me explain. The bottom, the row is actually is a risk and assessed by the global leaders in 2012. Then that going up, and that the top row is that the latest rating of the global by global leaders, that what kind of risks they perceive. And the green is basically pointed to the environmental related risk. And among this environmental related risk, which you have seen that going actually increasing dramatically for the last 10 years, the climate issue and the natural disaster, the extreme weather is the most important. So what I'm saying is that it's not just that the risk of how to prepare ourselves for those natural disasters, the extreme weathers, the climate change has been widely recognized for the last 10 years. Next, please. Then what is behind this trend? This shows that the very famous concept prepared or developed by the Earth system scientists, Johan Rockström lead this exercise. It basically measures that where our economic and societal system stands against the planetary boundaries or limitation of the planetary capacity to take on those environmental footprint. So it clearly shows that in the last, actually that 70 years, that our economic system has really pushed that the limitation of the capacity of the Earth system. And so that's why we have this natural disaster, the extreme weather. It's basically collision between the Earth system and the current economic system. So the fundamental solution to this problem is how to transform our economic and societal systems so that we could avoid further collision between economic system and Earth system. And this systemic thinking become very, very important to think about how to prepare ourselves for the natural disaster. Next slide, please. So for the last 8 years, while I was at the head of the GEF, we take this very much of the systemic approach to the both the mitigation and adaptation, or let me say the entire portfolio. We have assessed the entire portfolio through resilience lens and to see how we can enhance the resilience throughout our operation. So it's really doesn't matter the mitigation side or the adaptation side, or the if it were that the food system, the city system, infrastructure, decarbonization. But because today's topic is really that enhance the resilience, I just want to cite a few key points from that report done by Global Commission of Adaptation, to which I serve, for which I serve as one of the commissioner. So there are 3 key messages coming from this adaptation report. Number 1, that the revolution in understanding. We need to really understand and to make the risk visible and to more explicitly price the risks. The second revolution we need is planning to improve the way we make policy decision and investment decision, and to mainstream those resilience throughout the planning, to start with the upstream high-end analysis through risk screening and impact assessment. Then maybe most importantly, to learn how to incorporate high levels of uncertainty. There is no clear-cut answer to that, but at least there is a recognition, very strong recognition about how to incorporate the high level of uncertainty in planning. The last, third and last revolution from these processes is about financing. There was a widespread notion that disaster risk management or resilience is only financed by public money, but we need to challenge this myth that there must be good way to utilize the public sector resources to catalyze private sector investment in the project and program basis, and that is something very, very important finding throughout this exercise. So in a nutshell, that beyond those 3 revolutions, we also have to adapt our own mindset, how to prepare ourselves to be much more iterative, adapting, and participatory and inclusive in planning and learning and financing. But this is basically the key points which we learned through the March 11 event and incorporate the GEF operation. I think I used up my time, so let me stop here, that I can skip the last slide.
Thank you very much, Professor Shi. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Waba to speak.
Thank you very much, and good morning for those of you in Japan, good evening for those of you stateside. This past decade has seen increased and more diversified hazard risks. These are affecting communities, livelihoods, and economies everywhere. We've also seen positive transformations, people and communities building their own resilience, vulnerable nations adopting policies and strengthening their disaster risk reduction capacity, businesses and the international community providing technical and financial support. We've also seen significant advances of technology. Now, thanks to governments and communities that are leading the way, such as Japan, disaster risk management is now integral to sustainable development. The World Bank has been supporting many countries, cities, and institutions to make this transformational change towards resilience. And the slide shows several of these lessons learned that have been incorporated from the Great East Japan earthquake and how they have been applied to inform the practice of disaster risk management and resilience. On the World Bank side, now all our projects are screened for climate and disaster risk. Our average volume of annual disaster risk management commitments is $5 billion, which is about 11% of annual World Bank lending pre-pandemic response. In terms of the lessons learned and the impact of the Great East Japan earthquake, the lessons have greatly impacted how we work at the World Bank, specifically on mainstreaming resilience across sectors. So in 2014, we published a report called Learning from Mega Disasters, Lessons from the Great East Japan Earthquake, which had 36 knowledge notes with lessons for other countries, including the importance of both structural and non-structural measures and pre- and post-disaster strategies. Our Japan World Bank program for mainstreaming disaster risk management in developing countries provides analysis and knowledge learned from Japan and the Great Earthquake on enhancing resilience of investments in infrastructure. Now, this program has leveraged Japanese expertise to support more than 90 client countries since 2014, helping inform the design of over $32 billion in World Bank financing and contributions. Let me give you 3 quick examples of lessons learned and how they informed our client. The first is on community engagement and ownership of disaster risk management. So in 2016, delegations from Armenia, the Kyrgyz Republic, and Tajikistan attended a comprehensive disaster prevention drill in Saitama with more than 10,000 participants and 136 institutions, government, private sector, schools, and NGOs. This experience helped all 3 countries to inform their emergency preparedness and response. The second lesson, strengthening the resilience of lifeline infrastructures. So following the Great Earthquake, major damaged highways were repaired within a week, allowing emergency response to reach the affected areas. And this was due to the pre-arranged contracts between local governments and the construction companies to initiate the relief and the recovery work. Now, this experience is being replicated in various infrastructure projects, including in the Pacific. Last one, resilience being essential for both the public and the private sector by having business continuity plans to help reduce losses and recover quickly. These lessons, again, from the Great Earthquake, have helped strengthen the resilience of industries and economic zones in Turkey and in Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Waba. Our panelists have shared with us their views on some of the key lessons learned. Mr. Amano said that to go beyond disaster preparedness is the must, and that is the essence of resilience. Professor Imamura talked about the AI coming on board. Professor Ishii said that it's also key to change the mindset. And Dr. Waba said that the resilience development is really about everything from money, infrastructure, etc. On that point, I'd like to invite the panelists to answer the follow-up question regarding what are the key synergies that may be emerging in the field. Let me start by asking Professor Imamura, what is your view?
Yeah. Thank you very much. First of all, I appreciate very much for all support and help from many countries and the company at the time. So after that, we have the many collaboration with the United Nations, World Bank, overseas major university, NGO, and company had progressed. And particularly, we have received many information advices, exchange, and support regarding the recovery and reconstruction. It is the build back better in the damaged area, and which lead the support for new creation and revising of the disaster risk reduction strategy in Japan, as well as the other countries. So multi-defense system in Sendai is one example, I think. So yeah,
Thank you very much. Thank you. Professor Ishii, what about you?
Thank you. My takeaway response to your question about how this has changed the partnership with the synergy is that there is a clear recognition that the resilience be only gained via a comprehensive systemic approach joined by multi-sectoral stakeholders. The 3 points, 3 quick points. One, the planning has to change that the systemic planning, systemic approach is needed. It's a clear departure from more silo or single sector approach. Second point is participation, and it's not only just on language, but also that the multiple stakeholder at all levels, the citizens, the business, but also national government and local government. That leads to my third point, that the power, the authority, and the mission of local leadership is really important. So that across the world, that those lessons learned through those local leadership has really flourished and very well integrated into the process of disaster management, building back better. Thank you. Doden-san, you are muted.
Mr. Amano, what about you?
Thank you, Doden-san. I would emphasize that science and technology community has to be more involved in DRR activities conducted by governments and communities, because sometimes scientific knowledge was ignored by government. Scientific knowledge is definitely our basis. As for JICA, there has been an increasing collaboration with the academic community in DRR support since 2011. One example is our rehabilitation and recovery support project after the 2018 Central Sulawesi earthquake and tsunami disaster in Indonesia. Today's panelist, Dr. Imamura, supported us through taking part in the analysis of tsunami and liquefaction mechanism, which feeds the development of recovery and rehabilitation plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'd like to move on to the second discussion topic, which is about enhancing resilience, as some panelists have already highlighted in their comments. March 11th was a tragic reminder that no country or community can be spared from natural disasters. 10 years later, the global COVID-19 pandemic again reminds us of this lesson. The panelists will now share their views on the challenges and opportunities for continuing to enhance resilience over the next decade, where countries and communities may face more diverse extreme shocks than today, say climate change or rising sea levels or deforestation, rapid urbanization, and the list goes on. The panelists all have 3 minutes each. Please do try and make efforts to make your comments as compact as possible. I'd like to first invite Dr. Waba to speak.
Thank you. So obviously with climate change and rapid urbanization, the unprecedented event today will become the norm 10 years from now. So if we really are to achieve resilience and competitiveness, there's a real urgent need to strengthen our preparedness capacity to manage larger, multiple, and compounded risks. And we cannot achieve this without inclusion of the poor and the vulnerable, and participation and the innovation that the private sector brings. So the Great East Japan earthquake gives us lots of lessons and insights that inspire global leaders and practitioners striving for resilient development. So first, Japan's effort in building back better from the great earthquake tells a compelling story of how crisis can be turned into an opportunity to innovate and advance resilience, inclusiveness, and competitiveness. Second, many countries still have a lot to learn on how to plan for and respond to uncertain, complex, and compounded disaster risks due to natural and non-natural hazards, including pandemics. So the process of building back better in Tohoku and throughout Japan after the great earthquake is a significant contribution for the global toolbox for resilience. So key lessons include how to make multifunctional and inclusive evacuation and response centers, how to partner with public and private sectors. These are especially helpful for disaster response in a context of a pandemic, which requires more diverse facilities and services. So just a month ago, a magnitude 7.3 Richter earthquake struck the coast of Tohoku again. People in Fukushima and Miyagi were able to swiftly set up evacuation centers where families were provided with individual tents to enable distance from each other. Third, I understand that Japan is taking lessons from the great earthquake to gear up for the next large-scale earthquake, which could affect large cities and industrial areas, including Tokyo. So again, using technology and innovation, Japan is taking risk modeling, mapping, evacuation planning, simulation drills, awareness raising, and post-disaster business continuity planning to the next level. This provides guidance for global cities and businesses on how to plan and prepare for low probability, high impact disasters in context of uncertainty. Now, resilience is truly embedded within the culture of Japan. It's a key driving force that enables and enhances livable and competitive cities and communities. Well-designed green spaces in Japanese cities are equipped to serve both as public amenities and post-disaster response hubs, with pre-agreed management and operation arrangements through public and private cooperation. This seamless integration of having resilience as a norm in Japan is based on well-designed regulations and incentives, fostering engagements of the community and the private sector. And these efforts can inspire and help many countries and communities integrate resilience within their livability and competitiveness strategy. And it's throughout these efforts and these lessons learned that we can overcome today and tomorrow's disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Waba. I'd like to now ask Professor Shi for her comments.
Thank you. COVID-19 is really a wake-up call to us on two things: how unprepared we are on those mega shocks, but second, how we underestimate those risks. And also, to me, it was really shocking that how many times, how long we have turned the blind eyes to the message from science. I think Professor Amano, I think that touched upon that issue, but I realized after COVID-19 hit us that the epidemiology that in the world, there has been the long warning or alert that this kind of pandemic will come. It's not just when. And somehow our community has continued to ignore those scientific messages. So that again, time and again, that we are reminded that we were not really prepared to listen to those scientific messages, that the ones that beyond our own territory. So definitely, that's one thing that we need to pay attention to, much more open to the scientific message beyond that one discipline. The second thing is that, and it's a mindset, because that we continue to prepare ourselves for this changing situation. We need to really learn that day by day. So we need to get ourselves out of our own comfort zone and to try to adapt and try to be agile of those new learnings. Last point is that we need to really incorporate the emotional or behavioral change as science, that so that our resilience, the planning can take that full benefit of this new science. Those are three things that I would like to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ishii. Then on to Professor Imamura, please.
Thank you very much. The goal of the natural disaster, global climate change, and pandemic mitigation is the same, I think. So based on the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, it is more necessary to promote comprehensive DRR activity as the new industries with the participation of the private companies, in addition to the member of the citizen, neutral, local, national government. So it means implementation of the science and technology is important. So therefore, international proposal was we proposed Tohoku University into 2019 to the international standard development activities had just started under the topics of the international standardization of the disaster risk reduction, utilize small community in the infrastructures, TC268 I mentioned. Just a working group was officially launched in the last October, and the international meeting was held yesterday and today in the night, Japanese time, with 33 people and experts, and 13 countries are participating. And we are very proud now going to propose a conceptual standard and individual standards such as seismometer or some other system in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Imamura. Then on to you, Mr. Amano.
Thank you very much. The Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami and even today's pandemic show us that unexpected scale of disaster does occur. We must always prepare as far as we can anticipate and invest in risk reduction. At the same time, we must keep improving our capacity to cope with unexpected events. This remains an important principle. The challenge posed to us is to make this cycle of learning the lessons from the past and augment structural and non-structural aspects of this disaster risk reduction in every community and country. JICA has promoted and will continue this Build Back Better approach in our development cooperation in the decade to come. In addition, as it tends to be difficult for the government of developing countries to secure the budget of structural measures, which seems to be costly, JICA always prioritizes support in the structural risk reduction measures in developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amano. I think the very important message that shone through from all the panelists' comment was that the DRA is a comprehensive approach and also continuous effort that is crucial for resilience, which is a critical building block for achieving the sustainable development. Now, my follow-up question is, what are some of the key lessons and actions from Japan and globally that you think could be useful for developing countries to achieve their sustainable development goals, and what kind of synergies are expected with various actors involved? Let me start by asking Dr. Waba. 2 minutes, please.
There are several very relevant lessons. For me, the most important one was around the comprehensive approach. And it's really very much a whole of society approach, where all the different stakeholders have their contributions together to mainstreaming disaster risk management, disaster risk reduction, and resilience. And the chain will be as weak as the weakest link. The second is that of public-private partnerships. There's a very important role for the private sector to play, to bring innovations, agility, and to supplement the roles of the public sector and of community. And third, which is a recurrent theme that we have heard today, is on the equal importance of combining structural and non-structural measures, gray and green infrastructure, nature-based solutions. These are all would contribute, and especially with the policies and the regulations that can help supplement the structural measures to have an integrated approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Amano, what about you?
Thank you. Actually, we have 10 years left to implement Sendai framework for DRR. It is essential that all players and stakeholders have a shared understanding of how best we can achieve risk reduction and bring together our knowledge and resources into what is the most critical. For example, development partners like the World Bank and JICA have the ability to mobilize finances to invest in structural aspects of risk reduction, which is often a challenge for developing countries, but very critical to prevent economic damages from disasters. There is definitely an area to cooperate among developing partners. To synergize our financial support to developing countries, it is critical to have the same vision, strategy, and plan on the investment in DRR among various stakeholders and donors. Therefore, JICA is keen to support the formulation of a master plan, which would become a solid basis of cooperation among us. Also, I'm suggesting that international donors should more focus on the outcome of DRR projects and recognize how much each project directly reduces disaster risk, which need much money only donor can provide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Amano. Professor Imamura, your views, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me go back to the time before 2011. So we in Sendai and Miyagi had been preparing for many earthquake tsunami before the 2011, including the earthquake resilient building and disaster prevention drill and the education and management system in the Miyagi and Tohoku. It is for the Miyagi offshore earthquake tsunami around magnitude 8 class. It is estimated by the sciences by using the data. So this activity helped to reduce the disaster in 2011 certain level. But the series of the disaster, earthquake, tsunami, and fires, and accident on nuclear plant, it is beyond our activities. So we cannot operate emergency cases and also rescue lives. And now we are aware that the disaster mitigation as well as the risk management are becoming more important. And it's necessary to make assumption with more reliable and certainty. Certainty is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Shi, what about you?
Thank you. To me, the 10 years left is the key message, but it's not just the Sendai framework, but it is to achieve the net zero by decarbonization by 2050. We all have to recognize we are in the fundamental crisis, that the crisis caused by our key economic model is colliding with the capacity of the Earth system. And in order for us to really change the course and to save ourselves and to achieve the sustainable development by 2050, we need to transform our economic and social system. And we need to have a common vision towards that, be it it's a developed, developing, and also in the south or coastal and non-coastal. And towards that goal, today's discussion is really, really important. So when we think about DRM, we also have to think about that global comprehensive vision and the strategy to how we can transform our system towards the decarbonization to achieve the net zero. So the importance of this shared vision and the long-term vision, many of you have emphasized the importance of the comprehensiveness and multi-stakeholder, and these are all applicable to think about this and the shared vision towards the 2050. And the COVID-19 also pointed to that the importance of the Build Back Better, but this is also the part, should be an integral part of this comprehensive vision. And in that, I think the localities can play a very significant role to drive those transformations. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shi. Now I'd like to move on to the questions and answers session. Thank you very much for sending in all your questions. We only have about 7 or 8 minutes time remaining, but we'd like the panelists to answer as many questions as possible. So please keep your responses short. The first question is for Professor Imamura. Many of our panelists emphasize the significance of science. Professor Imamura, what do you think are the critical areas of knowledge and research gaps that can help further advance resilience initiatives? And how can global and Japanese research, including continued research from March 11th, help advance this?
Thank you very much. So what I say is the evaluation and the prediction of the future disaster and risk will continue to be important. but it is including some uncertainty. Uncertainty is it should be discussed the three parts. One is the natural phenomena, earthquake, tsunami, generation. It is very with probability. And the second is the human behavior, such as the panic and normally bias. And the third one is the society. So we should include such uncertainty in the sciences to contribute to the society. Thank you.
Very briefly, Professor Ishii, anything you might want to add?
Not for that. Thank you.
Okay. The next question I have here is for Professor Mr. Amano. Now, while many countries understand the urgency of strengthening resilience, especially now in the context of compound risks, they may not have the financial resources to prioritize investments. What are some ways in which countries and cities can still invest in resilience? Mr. Amano, please.
Yep. Thank you. Financial resources are definitely limited and can be one of the biggest challenges for many countries and cities. One of the ways to secure financial resources is, as I have already said, that to have a plan or strategy that addressed key interventions. As investment in DRR needs long term, we have to ensure that budget for DRR be secured. Therefore, the planning is critical to make sure that investment in DRR will be strategically kept in a long term, and we must make prioritization within DRR activities clear in a reasonable manner. Therefore, JICA provides support to formulate such strategic plan in various countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Waba, what about you? You oversee the operations and strategy within the World Bank. What about you, Dr. Waba?
I would basically recommend that in addition to the prior planning that Mr. Amano spoke about, that there would be a consideration also for the resilience enhancing measures that are of the non-structural type, of the sort of building codes and regulations, of the sort of taking in place the right policies. Many cities today, despite lacking investments, are investing in enhancing active mobility, cycling, walking, and a variety of other interventions that are not necessarily costly in terms of investments, but that could contribute towards important actions on both the resilience and climate change action as well.
Thank you, Dr. Waba. And the last question is about the skill sets for professionals working on resilience globally. And I'd like to ask all the panelists to answer this question in 2 or 3 sentences, perhaps. Let me start by Professor Ishii.
Right, a skill set. I think that what is required is an openness to work on the interdisciplinary world, and not only in science, but also to the between science and the practitioner, the public and the private, that kind of openness, and also the attitude to learn from, that next door. This seems to me extremely important.
I see, and that's precisely what you are doing, I think. And on to Dr. Waba, please.
I recommend quite a bit, in addition to the multidisciplinary training and skills, also to have quite a bit of investment in financing instruments, and especially financial innovations that could transfer risk, reduce risk. So a combination of risk reduction with also the risk transfer.
Thank you. Professor Imamura, in 2 or 3 sentences, please.
I have one sentence. Maybe disaster culture, sharing the past experiences from the ancient to the future is very important, including the naming of the place and some the oral and some the stone monument to transfer the memories. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Amano, please, your comment.
As I have already said, capacity to receive scientific knowledge is critical. That's all.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, time is also almost up, and I'd like to thank and congratulate each and every panelist for this very enlightening conversation, and to all the participants who have joined us today. When the time is right to travel, and when you have the chance to visit the afflicted area in Tohoku, people will be struck by the resilience of the people who have literally rebuilt their lives. So they say reconstruction is not only about building the right infrastructure, but about rebuilding the resilient community, which requires a holistic approach. As a panelist articulated in our conversation, building back better is a seamless process from disaster prevention onto sustainable, equitable, and resilient development. And for that to happen, all stakeholders, including international organizations, governments, businesses, civil societies, and maybe the media too, need to be on board and stay on board. So with that, I'd like to conclude this panel discussion and hand it over back to you, Maitri.
Thank you very much, Aiko. And it is a real challenge to try and summarize this very rich discussion that has just taken place. But I'm going to leave you with two thoughts. One is that the Great East Japan earthquake changed forever for all of us the way we do disaster risk management, not least because of the Sendai framework, but also because of the immense learnings that we are seeing every day, and that there is more to come, that there is more to learn. So that's one thought. The second thought I'd like to leave you with is that the real heroes of the reconstruction, of the rebuilding, of building back better are the communities of Tohoku. And it is from these communities that we need to learn more and more. With that, I would like to thank the government of Japan and all of our panelists who have come together today to be able to help us to commemorate this very rich day for this day on the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of the Great Earthquake. I would like to thank you, Aiko, for moderating this discussion so wonderfully, and all of our panelists. Again, the government of Japan, thank you very much on behalf of the World Bank and on behalf of GFDRR. Thank you. With that, I'll close.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.